Sure enough, we are live and we are streaming here on the old Facebook. So everybody, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause and thank you to Gary Allman here. He is the sleep performance coach, and this is going to be huge. We're always looking for great experts within the health and wellness and fitness, and not necessarily specific to golf, but we're looking much deeper under the hood into these fundamental things that everybody can benefit from. And one of the big three pillars of wellness that we talk about in our Tour Shot Golf community are hydration, nutrition, and recovery. Okay, and a lot of us have heard about the things that you eat and how much water to drink and staying hydrated, but sleep is the one that we often neglect. We're always doing it, but are we really getting enough out of it? And we're going to go in later into this conversation into a bunch of questions that the audience has sent in ahead of time, and we are going to open up a live Q&A. So anybody watching, drop in the comments below any questions that you have, and we'll go ahead and get to those towards the end. But I know one of the big questions that's coming is, why do I wake up tired? And that was probably the number one. But before we get into that, I want you to share with everybody a little bit of your background and how you got to be the sleep performance coach.
Yeah, first of all, Blaine, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it, and great to be in the community and on this live with you. So yeah, let me dive into my background. I originally started as a mindset coach. We can fast forward the corporate years of my 9 to 5 before I transitioned out of that. But my background was in mindset because I had a lot of leadership training in my previous management roles in a corporate position. And naturally that attracted me because I wanted to improve my mindset and just become a better person. And the more I got into performance and mindset and well-being and things like that, the more I kept coming across sleep as a performance factor. And I kind of ignored it at first, and I thought, that's going to be very difficult to coach. How do you do that? And mindset is what everybody wants. That's what my perception was at the time. And the more I worked with the clients I was working with, these entrepreneurs, they kept saying to me, oh, I'm always burnt out. I get in 4 or 5 hours a night. And I'm starting to think, this is telling me something here. You're not living a healthy life. You can't focus. You can't actually make decisions you need to in your business because you're very, very sleep deprived. And naturally, my curiosity led me to dig into sleep more. And then I thought, no one's really talking about this. I can actually dedicate time alongside my current business to kind of amalgamate this into what I already do. And anyway, I migrated into that sleep niche and just went all in. And I thought, this is what I can do. This is what I love to do. It's so crucial for performance. And there's so many people out there, like you say, that wake up tired and they go, oh, I get 8 hours a night, but I still feel tired every day. Why is that? And they don't understand it. And unfortunately on the market, there's only really 2 solutions. You can go and buy a new bed and get a bit more comfortable, or you can go and see your doctor and get some sleeping pills or a prescription. There's no one actually out there for coaches with sleep. But when we look at mindset and we look at fitness and nutrition, there's a ton of options. So we've just grown our brand as the sleep performance coach. And yeah, here we are. We're working with high-level entrepreneurs. We're working with professional sportsmen. I've recently finished working with a PGA teaching pro as well here in the UK. So all sorts of people can benefit from sleep. And I know that your community have asking questions before this live today. So I'm really, really excited to see what they've got to say in more detail. So yeah, let's go.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's something that we all do, but very rarely. I mean, maybe it's a fluke, right? Maybe we wake up one morning, wow, I got such a great night's sleep, but we don't know why. Absolutely. And we don't know how to replicate it. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problems. Even myself, even for the last 10 years, I've been looking into things like sleep and what goes along with it, but I'm not a sleep expert. And so selfishly, I get to pick your brain a little bit too, which is going to be really fun. But let's start with the idea that this is for everybody. This isn't just for people in the golf community. This isn't just for entrepreneurs. This is for absolutely all of us. And we have the ability, literally overnight, to set ourselves up for the next day or to feel behind for the next day. And so one of the questions that we got a lot sent in from the audience was, why is it that I wake up tired? And I'm sure there's a lot of components to that. But with
Mm.
that being the number one question, that's exactly where I want to start. So why is it that people, even if they got 8, 10, maybe even sometimes 12 hours a night, they're not waking up feeling refreshed?
Yeah, there's two key principles with that. Like you say, there are a ton of factors involved in our actual overall wellness when we wake up in the morning and our energy levels. The two factors are sleep quality and fitting into your natural circadian rhythm. So like you say, even if people are sleeping 9, 10, 11, 12 hours, it may not be the right level for them, but there seems to be this stigma in society that the more we sleep, the better we'll feel. The reality is you can feel better on 6 or 7 hours, depending on your genetics, than you can actually on 9 or 10, because your body is functioning better and it's actually regulating the processes in your body better and recovering within a shorter time frame. So effectively, it doesn't have what we would call lag. So it's not lagging behind. It hasn't kicked in processes and done overtime because you've chosen to not get out of bed. If we're forcing the body to do extra work, when we do wake up, having got longer sleep, we're still going to feel lethargic because the body has overworked itself. It's done work that it doesn't need to do because you've told it to do so. You can easily force yourself to stay asleep and hit snooze on the alarm, and your body will go through the processes again. It will cleanse your cells, it will remove toxins from your brain, it will speed up your metabolism, break down nutrients from food. It doesn't need to do that work more than it is actually optimal for you. So if we can actually fit into the category that we need to, we can actually get more time back in the day and we can plan our entire schedule around the best possible sleeping window for us. So that is the biggest thing. It is actually the body working behind, and then the sleep quality comes with that as well. If we can optimize the sleep quality and fit into that window, then naturally we'll wake up feeling a lot more refreshed and full of energy than we already do.
So let's go a layer deeper there, because there's a lot that we can unpack there. But let's start with, what does a model of good sleep look like? If we do get quality sleep, regardless of the time, what's actually happening? You mentioned a few things like our cells being cleansed and detoxed. We're digesting the food. You know, most of us just think we lay down, our brain turns off, and we wake up when the alarm tells us. But it sounds like there's more to that. So what happens when we do get good sleep?
So the body will go through 4 stages of sleep. It will go through 3 stages of non-REM sleep, and it will go through REM sleep. So during REM sleep, that's the stage where the brain actually reconnects and consolidates memories and forms new neural connections in the brain. And if we don't get good REM sleep, that's when we wake up and we've got brain fog, or our eyes are quite bloodshot and they sting quite a bit because the mental clarity is not there and the body hasn't actually focused on the brain as much as it needs to. Now, to cut through the actual other 3 stages, we can divide them into deep sleep, and we can divide them into light sleep, and we can divide them into transitional sleep. That's the easiest way to explain it. So with deep sleep, that's where the brain is cleansed and it removes toxins from the brain. Things like, there's a name for one of the toxins. I'm on a live, obviously I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it actually can cause Alzheimer's disease. So that is cleansed by the lymphatic system in the brain, and spinal fluid is washed over the brain, and all of those toxins are cleansed. So if we're not getting deep sleep, again, we are more susceptible to headaches, we are more susceptible to migraines, we're more susceptible to brain fog, lack of clarity and focus, because the brain is not cleansed as it's supposed to be. And then we have light sleep, which is the stage where you kind of drift off, your muscles relax, your breathing rate slows down, and you start to drift into that deep stage. Deep stage is where we see the most brainwave activity. That's the early part of the night. And REM we would expect to see in the latter part of the night. And then transitional sleep is just the transitional stages we go through as we enter into each stage. But yes, the actual quality of those stages of sleep can be drastically improved with timing and circadian timing. And you mentioned we have our dinner, then we go to bed. If we're having our dinner too late, the body is not going to enter into certain stages of that sleep because it's actually trying to enter into sleep, but the brain is also split decisively, sending signals to the stomach to actually digest food, that it got too late into the evening. It hasn't been able to focus fully on getting the body into a state of deep sleep and restorative sleep. So there's loads of things and factors that trigger sleep.
So on the food note, I've heard so many mixed things about that, where I've heard all right, you shouldn't eat 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. I've heard that you should eat a heavy carb dinner before you go to bed, or I've heard that you should take a tablespoon of honey before you go to bed. There's so much out there about the timing of sleep and the timing of eating in relation to sleep. But it sounds like one of the things the brain's doing when we sleep is cleansing and cleaning and moving and cells and toxins and all that stuff. How big of a factor is the food we eat on the sleep we get?
Food is a significant factor, but I wouldn't say it is a decisive factor. Reason being, there's a study by a doctor called Dr. Sachin Panda that actually fitted a group of, I think it was young guys under 30, and then another group in the same category. And one of the group got time restricted eating in a 12-hour window, and the other got time restricted eating outside of a 12-hour window. So they had naturally good metabolism. They were relatively fit. But the group that ate outside of the 12-hour window suffered consistently with poor sleep because their body couldn't regulate the processes it needs to. But they both ate the same calories and the same quality of food each day. And this goes to show the impact of timing. And this is especially applicable to people who work long hours and they eat late. They eat sort of 8, 9 p.m. and then go to bed at 10. The body is not ready to shut you down for sleep. So it doesn't actually matter necessarily what you eat. You can get away with the odd bad day as long as your timing is good. If your body's functioning better and regulating its processes better, naturally your metabolism is going to be higher. The breakdown of fat and nutrients is going to be far better, and the natural breakdown of glucose and sugar in the body as well is going to be increased drastically. So 3 hours is the golden rule that we look at. You can push it to 4 if you really want to, but 3 hours is what we look at. And that also ties in with a decrease in body temperature as well. If we suddenly eat late, the blood rushes to the stomach, it ramps up our core temperature, and the body needs to cool down for sleep. We look for 16 to 18 degrees Celsius, which is around 61 to 64 Fahrenheit. So if we can enter into that state into light sleep, then the natural progression into deep and REM sleep will be far easier to achieve.
And you'd mentioned with food, the difference between fats and sugars. And I know those are two of the big pathways for energy for the brain. Is that something that we should be considering to improve sleep? Is the ratio of fats to sugars? And do we need to time those, different macronutrients at different parts during the day? Or, what's a roughly speaking, because obviously everybody's different when it comes to nutrition needs, but from a general sleep perspective, what are some things that we should be looking for where it comes to diet to help the health of the brain to be able to do what it needs to do?
The best thing to do with breakfast is to avoid carbs in the morning. The body is not ready to break down sugars in the morning first thing when you wake up, and it will spike your sugars drastically, and you'll likely feel very lethargic and crash later on in the day. That's quite similar for a lot of people.
So everybody listening, we can hear Gary's not from the USA here, but in America, our breakfast is sugary cereals and pastries and icings, and you're saying that's actually dessert food that we should eat later.
Absolutely, yeah. The body is not ready to process that many calories and that much sugar. If you're waking up, that's like putting rocket fuel in the body, and you're gonna feel fantastic for probably an hour, and then once everything levels out, you're gonna feel very lethargic because the body's entered into processes to balance that sugar it doesn't need to do because it's got the sugar at the wrong time. So we look for high fat and high protein. Now, when I say high fat, I don't mean you can go and binge on McDonald's and everything else like that. I mean good quality fat, things like turkey bacon or eggs or something like that with good fat in them, and maybe a little bit of oil or something like that. That's pretty good fat that the body can break down relatively quickly. We don't want high saturated or high trans fat food. And high protein food, that's pretty easy for people to guess what high protein food would be in the morning. And later on throughout the day, we can look to move that into, again, high protein, gradually increase carbs from kind of midday onwards to give us that energy for the rest of the remaining day. Now the body is in a state of fully functioning as it should be. Now in the evening, we want to be increasing the amount of carbs we have, but no later than 3 hours before bed. Now that has to be good quality carbohydrates, not highly processed or sugary carbohydrates. Now, the reason being, there's obviously a natural production of melatonin, sleep hormone, usually around 8, 9, 10 p.m., depending on your genetics. And that will tie in with the serotonin release from your high carb dinner. So if you're having things like sweet potato or even white potato can be pretty good, it can actually allow the body to relax, and the serotonin and melatonin can blend to give you that sleepy feeling and that deeper feeling of tiredness ready for bed. If you're having processed sugar, again, you're going to get an energy spike when your body's not ready to. Your body is trying to wind down and you're giving it energy that it doesn't need to actually have at that particular time. So it's going to cause circadian rhythm disruption, and ultimately your sleep quality is going to suffer as a result of that.
So I've heard energy, and I've heard sugar, and I've heard timing. Caffeine. Let's talk about it. It's a smart drug. It can enhance so much good stuff, but how does it play into sleep? Does it actually give us energy? Does it make up for a bad night's sleep? How late should we be drinking it in the day? Should we be drinking it at all?
Okay, I'm glad you asked about it, because caffeine is not something that we need as human beings. However, I drink caffeine. I have good sleep, but I still drink caffeine. One, because I like coffee, and two, because in the morning, I just want that boost. I just like it. I have 1 cup a day and that's it. And that's just my routine. I've cut back drastically. I used to have a lot more before I fully went into sleep. When I was starting my business, I'd get buying a lot more than that. But caffeine is an interesting one because people reach for it as soon as they wake up. Now, that is a big red flag. And for 2 reasons. One, because you're not hydrated. You lose around 1 liter of water while you're sleeping through breathing and through light sweating, even more in the summer. Obviously, you're going to sweat a lot more. So even if your bedroom environment is optimized, your body's still going to be working harder to cool you down, which is going to create more sweat. So when you wake up, drink that 1 liter of water. That's what we advise people to do. And that will obviously be absorbed by your muscles straight away. It will get your digestion flowing. It will get the bowel going. It will get everything else going. And the brain will be hydrated as well. Then we look to delay caffeine for 90 minutes to 2 hours. Now, the reason being, when we wake up in the morning, we have a natural spike of cortisol and adrenaline. That's what gets us out of bed, and that's what gets our eyes open. Now, cortisol is a stress hormone, but the body does need it to function, and it does need it to actually increase energy and productivity at certain times. Now, if we're having caffeine when we wake up, that's competing with the cortisol and adrenaline, and it's not going to have any effect because the cortisol is a natural process. The caffeine is obviously a drug. So they're competing like that. They're just rubbing against each other. Nothing's happening. When the cortisol and adrenaline wear off, the caffeine wears off too. We then feel lethargic. We reach for another cup of caffeine and the cycle continues. If we can delay for 90 minutes to 2 hours, the cortisol and adrenaline will subside. We'll feel great because that natural process is kicked in. And I'm not saying this is instant, guys. If you love drinking caffeine, this is going to take some time to bed in, but your body's natural production will make you feel great anyway. When that dips and you start to feel a dip in energy, maybe around 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, then you can have your caffeine. If you feel the dip earlier, have your caffeine. If you're getting up at 7, you feel the dip around 8:30, that's still 90 minutes. You can have your caffeine then. You will feel a lot better. And naturally, the caffeine is doing its thing because it doesn't have anything blocking it in the way. And then we can look to dial back the intake because we'll rely on less caffeine throughout the day, because our natural processes are functioning better. Now, in the evening, we want to be looking to cut caffeine out about 8 hours before bedtime. Now, the reason being, there's adenosine triphosphate, which is a byproduct of our energy. So as we move throughout the day, this product ATP is in our cells and it is broken down. Now, adenosine is a standalone byproduct that actually bonds to the brain and the receptors in the brain to cause sleepiness and drowsiness. Now, if we are having too much caffeine throughout the day and too late into the day, the caffeine actually blocks those receptors and doesn't allow the adenosine to bind to the brain. So if we're having caffeine late on, say around 3 p.m., 4 p.m., then the caffeine wears off, the adenosine suddenly comes in and takes over, and we get that massive crash in the afternoon where we feel really, really lethargic. And it's the same in the morning. It's just how the body functions, but it's just with different chemicals and different hormones, cortisol and adrenaline in the morning, adenosine in the evening. It's just the natural circadian rhythm and our biology. So if we can allow the adenosine and that sleep pressure to build up, we'll start to feel sleepy at the right time. If we're pouring caffeine into our body and our bloodstream, all the processes the body wants to do are not being done at the right time. And ultimately, it's going to cause us to feel sleepy and feel very, very drowsy at times we don't want to be. So that's going to obviously then lead to poor sleep quality and overall poor sleep duration as well. Now, just one more thing, Blaine, and I'm doing a lot of talking around caffeine, but it's something that I get asked a lot about. People may think, well, Gary, I can have a cup of coffee at 10 o'clock at night and I can go straight to bed. Fantastic. Now, that's likely that your caffeine sensitivity is low. However, your body has become so used to drinking caffeine that it has no effect on you. It is a placebo effect, and it is your perspective that caffeine still has an effect. Now, it may have an effect in the morning, but over time, it is where it wears off. Now, only have an effect in the morning because you've had a duration of around 8 or 9 hours. We've not had any caffeine. All of a sudden, you have more. The cycle continues. Your sleep quality will never, ever be as good as it can be if you continue in that cycle. You may feel okay or think you can just get by like that, but you're leaving a lot on the table. You may be leaving a lot on the table in regards to your mental clarity and your actual focus, and you don't want to be depending on caffeine to get you through the day. So this is something that we need to look at. If a person has low caffeine sensitivity, do they even need it at all? If we optimize their sleep and their sleep quality, naturally they're going to be more energetic in the morning, and then we can look to cut caffeine out over the course of, say, 6 to 8 weeks.
So I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I had asked you a little bit earlier, what does good sleep look like? But I also feel like on the other side of the coin, there might be a lot of us that through placebo effect or whatever it is, we think we're getting good sleep, but we're not actually getting good sleep. So what are some of the big signs or red flags that you're not actually sleeping well? And just so we can kind of bring this awareness of, oh, maybe that is me. Maybe I do need to look a little bit deeper into this. What happens if we don't get good sleep? What's not functioning as optimal?
Yeah, people can get by on 5 or 6 hours sleep. We can actually function as human beings, but if we're going through the day and we're getting distracted very easily, we're driving to work and we're forgetting where the last 3 miles have gone. Our brain's just switched off and we're just doing everything unconsciously. We're not actually focusing on what we need to. It's because the brain is tired. So it's actually stopped using the frontal lobe and it's gone into the midbrain, which is your unconscious side, where you know how to drive. So it will take you there, but it won't actually be doing any critical thinking because it's sleep deprived. So this is why, sleep deprivation, if you go 24 hours without sleep, it's the equivalent to drunk driving. And for anyone who wants to look that up, that's true. So if we're stacking our sleep deprivation over time, we're more likely to switch off and more likely to lose focus when we need to. Now, it's not just obviously driving to work, it's in the office. We procrastinate. We have brain fog. We're in a meeting and all we can think about is the meeting finishing. None of it's going in. Thousands, if not millions of people go through this daily, but they'll never ever pin it down to actual sleep quality. They'll think, I got 7-8 hours last night. I can't be tired. Maybe I just need, maybe I've not had enough caffeine today, or maybe I need to hit the gym and exercise. Exercise is fantastic. It builds sleep pressure. It switches on the brain. It turns on the muscles and activates the cells. But if we're not having the foundation of our health, which is sleep, we're always going to be in that cycle. And these are the big red flags. And I know a lot of people do suffer with this, but they never actually pin it down to their sleep. It is things, just forgetting basic stuff, where you left your car keys. It sounds silly, but it's true. This is how critical it is, guys, to the quality of our thinking and our decision making. Even more so if we're playing a really mental sport like golf, we can't make the right decisions if we're sleep deprived. If we're going to bed really late, we're having poor quality nutrition, we're not warming up properly, how can we expect to play our best golf? We just can't. And I know, Blaine, that you teach a lot about that, around mental focus, nutrition, everything else, and sleep goes hand in hand. And it is basic stuff that we face daily that we don't associate with sleep deprivation.
Yeah, that's so powerful, because just a couple of weeks ago, the world got to watch Phil Mickelson at practically 51 years old beat the best players in the world at debatably one of the toughest courses in the world, because he spent all of his energy on focus. And obviously sleep is a part of that. You can't focus your best unless you've gotten a good sleep. And he's doing the whole gamut, right? He's changing his whole wellness lifestyle. But it just goes to show that age, it might just make it a little bit more difficult, but it's still achievable. Is there any research, we've heard kids need more sleep than adults. How much truth is that? And does our need for sleep change as we age and go through life?
Yes, drastically, yeah. Children, especially infants, will need around 14 to 17 hours per night. Toddlers about 11 to 13, teenagers around 10 to 12, so we say. Adults, the ballpark is 7 to 9, but there are people that genetically can get by on 6. But there's Elon Musk has actually had extensive tests on him, and he can function on 6 hours. He's come out multiple times in the media and said that's when he feels his best. But that is a minute amount of the population. That's actually only 4% of people that can function on 6 hours, fully function, feel rested, deliver in their job and in their life, not make mistakes, not have their focus or energy wasted. The majority of people will need 7 to 9 hours, obviously dependent on our physical exertion as well. If we're looking at a high level athlete, LeBron James, for instance, he sleeps 12 hours a night because he's always on the move. He's training hard, he's traveling, and he needs more sleep. And if we can get into the idea of not having just 8 hours per night, but knowing our blueprint schedule. So if we say, for me, my schedule would be say 10 p.m. to 5:30. So that's 7.5 hours. So I feel great on that. However, if I need to move it because I've had a particularly long day at work, or I've been in the gym working hard, I know I can dial that into 9:30 to give me 8 hours of sleep. And I'm not focused about the number, I'm focused about my schedule. So I know what is optimal for me, and I also know what I can get away with. So it removes the guesswork. People are always going to bed guessing what they need, and they're looking at the clock, going to bed at 11 p.m. one night, then going to bed at 9 p.m. the following night, going to bed at 12 p.m. the following night, because they can't plan their schedule around their sleep. They don't take the priority that sleep needs. They don't give sleep the priority it needs. So that's when stress builds, that's when poor sleep quality takes over, and that's when people become fixated on getting a certain hour. And duration is only a small factor. We need to look at longevity. How long have you actually been getting good quality sleep? How regular are you getting good quality sleep? We need to look at the duration, and then we need to look at the actual quality with the various sleep stages of your sleep to make sure it's right for you. It's not just the duration, but people become fixated on their 8 hours. I have to get 8 hours. If I don't get it, I'm stressed. But they never actually achieve it because they're so stressed about getting it all the time. So that's how important it is to detach from the number and focus on the quality of our sleep and actually what is best for us when it comes to timing as well.
Definitely. I'm so glad that you said 10 to 5:30, because that's my sleep cycle as well. And it's nice to hear that 7.5, there's some truth to that. But I want to get your take, because today is a great example. I knew that we were going to be talking, so I prioritized my sleep and I got some extra. But what I personally do is, if my normal cycle is 10 to 5:30, but I want to sleep in, I'll go to bed at the same time of 10, but get up at 7 o'clock, 90 minutes later. So I'd love to hear a little bit about timing and sleep cycles and circadian rhythm. And how do you know what is right for you? Because I know people who, they're better if they go to bed at midnight and then wake up at, say, 8 or something like that, just because their circadian pushes them in that direction. I personally like going to bed a little bit earlier and waking up before the sun. Tell us a little bit about sleep cycles. We've talked about how you go from light sleep into the deeper stages and things like that, but how long does that take, and how should we be timing it so that when we wake up, boom, we're right there? Because gosh, we all know that there's some days the alarm goes off and you're like, man, I was just in the middle of the deepest sleep. I just want to go back to sleep. And there's other days the alarm, or maybe you don't even need an alarm. You wake up a half hour before your alarm and like, wow, I feel so good. And maybe habitually we press the snooze button. We get that extra 30 minutes, but we wake up feeling like crap. Why is that? How do we time this?
Yes, great question, Blaine. It's interesting you said about the people going to bed at midnight and waking up at 8 as well, because I've actually worked with a guy who went to bed at 2 a.m. and woke up at 10 a.m. and that was his optimal sleeping window. Now, the ultimate way is to look into your genetics, and that's why we do DNA tests with our clients. We actually include that, and we get a 500-page report around food and stress, chronic disease, sleeping windows, everything. That's the ultimate level. But to start with the basic thing, we need to look at our current routine. So we need to look at what we're currently doing. So when do you start to feel sleepy, and when do you wake up? And if we can rate our energy levels on that single routine, if we're waking up and our energy is a 5, that's a big red flag. We go, I've gone to bed at 11 p.m. and I'm waking up at 6. I'm getting 7 hours, but I'm tired every single day. My energy is a 5. Right, there's a problem. Something is out of sync in your routine. Your body is not functioning as it needs to. So maybe we need to dial your routine back. And it is all about, without going into the DNA test and the genetic stuff, it is all about experimenting with our timing. And the circadian rhythm adapts remarkably fast. We can get into a new routine in approximately 4 to 5 days with the circadian rhythm. The body will adapt quickly. The unconscious mind will take a lot longer, probably take around 3 weeks to actually adapt it to the new habit, because you have to consciously think about it all the time. Watch the clock, make sure you're going to bed at the right time, setting your alarm at the right time, making sure your environment is ready for you to sleep and it's nice and dark and cool and everything else. But if we're not bringing awareness to our conscious habits, if we're not bringing conscious awareness to our habits, how can we actually change them to become beneficial to us? So we have a sleep journal that we use for people, which is just a graph with boxes, Monday to Sunday, so we can rate the whole week. What time do you go to bed? What time do you stop eating? What time did you stop drinking? What time did you, how many times did you get up in the night? What time did you have an alcoholic drink, if any? How was your stress that day? How was your mood in the morning? How was your energy in the morning? Did you exercise? If so, what time? All sorts of stuff like that will start to get people aware of what they're doing in a day. If someone's writing down massively varied sleeping times, we know that there's a serious problem, and we know that we need to dive into their timing and their routine. Now, I'm not talking about having a set in stone routine where you go to bed on the minute every single night. There is obviously some flexibility, but like I said earlier, you need to have a blueprint that you know works best for you. Now, like you said, Blaine, if you want to lay in for 1 day a week, that's fine. It's when you start doing it 3, 4, 5 days a week, that's a serious issue, because it disrupts everything from what is optimal for you to actually what is suboptimal for you. So then we need to get you back into your optimal routine. But because you don't know that, stress and anxiety builds, and obviously problems arise. But if you do know that, and you have, say you go away on a holiday, you're traveling, there's jet lag. When you settle in, you know what time is best for you to go to bed. You don't need to be staying up late all the time. You obviously want to enjoy your holiday. You don't want to be tired all the time. You still want to be going to bed and getting good sleep so you can enjoy the day and do whatever you want to do. And this is where awareness is so critical to implementing new patterns and new routines for people. It doesn't have to be rocket science. We keep everything simple. If someone wants to know about the science, I'm happy to talk about that in far more detail, but it confuses people. We don't need to know about that. We need to know about what we're currently doing, why it's wrong, and how we can create better habits that serve us in the future.
Absolutely. And anybody who wants to learn more, we're going to talk at the end here about how you can get in touch with Gary and go through one of his programs here, which I think would be massively beneficial. One of the things you had mentioned, though, which I'm really glad you did, was this idea of traveling on holiday. And I bring this up because there's a lot of players that I work with or who are in the community that do travel to play. We have a couple of players in the community that are headed to the U.S. Senior Open, the U.S. Senior Women's Open in July, just a couple of weeks from now. They're going to be traveling across time zones. We're talking about flying to new states, new time zones, new environments, new beds, absolutely everything. Maybe they have an early tee time one day, a late tee time the other. It's all up in the air. And you had mentioned it takes about 4 to 5 days for a circadian rhythm to shift and about 3 weeks for the subconscious mind to adapt. But what about somebody who is traveling a lot, whether it's a player who's out on tour or they're going on holiday, or even, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the group as well who are trying to manage their businesses, and maybe they just like to play the game while they're traveling the world. How does somebody manage the jet lag and the change of time zones where, sure, they can try to go to bed at the same time every night, but the time is different? How do they get through that hurdle?
Yeah, from their unconscious mindset, obviously they're adaptable. They accept that there's going to be drastic change in their schedule. They're not set on a specific time as much as the general public are, or someone who's based in one place. But for someone traveling like that, we need to take their current routine and then map it into a later time zone. So say they're traveling from East Coast to West Coast, correct me if I'm wrong, is what, a 3-hour time difference?
4 from east to west.
Okay, 4. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so yeah. So if it's say 6 o'clock here, it's going to be 1 to 9. You might be right. It is 3. I should know. Central Mountain Pacific. You're right. It's 3. So
okay, so it's 3 hours. So say they're traveling from New York to LA, so it's 5. It's 3-hour difference. So we look at this current schedule in New York, and we would say, right, what's the equivalent at that time? So what time would you be eating? So say they have a 5 p.m. flight, and they land at 11 p.m. at night. Okay, so it's technically 8 p.m. back in New York still. So what time would they be having dinner? If they're having dinner at 8 p.m. in New York, they would need to eat at 11 p.m. in LA. Now that may sound crazy, but if they do that as soon as they land, then that will start to sync everything, because that's what their body's expecting. The body isn't aware that they're traveling in the air. The body is just sat stationary and it's going through emotion. It's not actually aware of what is happening to it. It still thinks it's grounded. It still thinks it's in the same time zone. So when you land, you need to incorporate that as well. And then you'll need to go to bed later. So if it's 11 p.m. in LA and there's a 3-hour time difference, you need to be going to bed the equivalent of 11 p.m. in New York, which would be 2 a.m. in LA. So if you go to bed at that time, it's still that 3-hour window for your body to digest the food. Even that's a lot later than your usual bedtime, your circadian rhythm doesn't know that, because it's dark in LA. It still thinks it's 11 p.m. in New York because you've just landed. That's when we start to sync stuff. That's the critical sort of first window for travel. And then the next day we would wake up and we would carry on as we are, because we've woken up at the usual time. And then even if we've got a shorter sleeping window, the first part of the timing has still been there. So we have adapted. We've got, say, 6 or 7 hours that we need to, and then we can start to incorporate that again. And I would recommend probably doing that for the first 2 days or day and a half. So you have lunch at the same time as you would in New York, but obviously you're in LA. So if you have a lunch at 12 p.m., you'd be having it at 3 p.m. in LA. So the timing is still there. And from a say it's professional golf, it's a 4-day event. They're going to be landing probably a week and a half, 2 weeks before the actual event to bed in. And this is the sort of stuff that I've heard about and I've researched. This is the sort of stuff they do. Their bedroom environment is very dark. It's very cool. So even if it's blazing sun outside, they can still get the good sleep that they need to actually sync their rhythm. And then when they go away to another time zone, the same thing applies. Luckily in the States, if they're traveling coast to coast, it's only a 3-hour window. If they're traveling from California to the UK to play in the Open, obviously that's an 8-hour difference. That's drastically different. But the principle still applies. We just have to give ourselves a couple days extra or 3 days extra to actually adapt to that time. It's a difficult thing to do for the human body, but it is biologically possible, but it's all to do with timing. There's such things now as the Time Shifter app. I don't know if you've heard of that, Blaine.
No, Time Shift app.
Yeah, there's an app called Time Shifter, which you can actually put in your current schedule, tell it where you're traveling to, and it will give you your ideal schedule for the destination. And stuff like that is huge. I've used that with a couple of clients. We're trying to get affiliated with the guy who actually does the app. That would be huge for us. But that's the kind of mentality that we need. We need to be willing to adapt and change. If we're lucky enough to obviously travel a lot for our job and experience different countries, different cultures, that's what we need to be willing to do and just accept it. And like I say, the body will adapt. It's never the ideal scenario, but if we give ourselves enough time and we do things at the time that we need to, we can get the best out of our body when we need it.
So it sounds like, to your point, it all comes back to having a baseline and awareness to fall back on. And if
effectively, yeah.
So, for example, the couple of players I have going to the Open, and we're looking about a month from now, it sounds like they need to spend the next 2 or 3 weeks journaling and creating an awareness so that we can plan for when they do travel. And once they have that idea of, hey, this is where I perform the best, then, like you said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but they can at least do the best that they can. And the closer that they can get to their baseline, the better that they're going to feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. If they say to you, Blaine, my energy is fantastic, I'm a 9 out of 10 if I go to bed at midnight and I wake up at 7 a.m., fantastic. If I go to bed at 10 p.m. and I wake up at 5 and I still get 7 hours, I feel like crap. And you go, right, okay, so you're likely to be a night owl chronotype. And also, we need to look at your timing windows for when you are traveling, because this is what you're telling me. Now, this is what I mean by conscious awareness. If people are going around their day-to-day lives and they're not aware of what their habits are when it comes to timing and actual sleep schedule, we can't look to optimize their performance when it really, really matters.
Awesome. I love that. So at this point, what I want to do is transition into some audience Q&A. For anybody who's watching live, go ahead and drop your questions down in the comments below. We have gotten so many over just boy, the last 48 hours, especially. There have been a ton that have come in. So I want to start by making sure that we get those taken care of. And then at the end, for all of you watching, Gary has decided to share his top 10 sleep performance hacks with us, which I'm super excited about. So those are going to be available for everybody inside the Tour Shot Golf Academy Facebook group. So if you see us cut out early, that's where we are. I'll have the replay posted over there, but we're at least going to get to the audience Q&As here. And we already answered the number one, which is, why do I wake up tired? But let's talk about another one that a lot of people have asked about, and you kind of alluded to, where you said, really, in the modern sense, our two main solutions, if you will, are get a better bed or see a doctor for sleeping pills. What are some other more natural things that we can do? Are there any supplements or vitamins or non-addictive forming sleeping drugs that we should be using to just move ourselves in the right direction?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're really, really struggling with sleep, guys, I would recommend taking magnesium citrate. That's a very, very good supplement. I'm not sure on the dose. However, if you buy a bottle of it, obviously it will be the recommended dose anyway. It's the purest form of magnesium citrate, in my opinion. Bear in mind, that is my opinion only. If you want to research it, feel free, but it has huge benefits of sleep and actual hormone regulation when it comes to sleep and muscle function as well. I'd also recommend, if you want to take melatonin, you can, but don't do it forever. I would say probably 3 months tops, because it can inhibit your body's natural production of melatonin. However, when you first start taking it, it will help you sleep, and naturally over time the body will start to produce more melatonin because it senses what's in the body, and it will release it anyway. But 3 milligrams of melatonin is what I would recommend. There are some tablets out there that have up to 50 milligrams, which is a huge amount of melatonin, guys. So please, please don't buy that. 3 milligrams is all you need. That's how powerful and potent melatonin is. And I know that for a fact because I've done a lot of research with that. Magnesium citrate, my memory and my actual research on that isn't as clear as melatonin, but I get asked about that a lot because it's quite a common supplement for people struggling with sleep who don't want to go down the prescription route. But 3 milligrams is what I would recommend if you're looking at that.
That's perfect. And for everybody watching, I'm also on a magnesium supplement, and it is fantastic. I do find taking it about an hour or two before bed, I sleep well. And then I have a separate magnesium supplement that I take in the mornings, more for organ function, brain, heart, lung, kidney, that whole deal right there. But it sounds like melatonin, just use it to start sleeping well, and then your body can already make it. You just got to start that cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's like jump starting the engine. Think about it like that. Yeah.
Perfect. What is the difference between REM sleep and deep sleep? We've talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but we had a lot of questions coming in, particularly in relation to dreams.
Okay. So the basic principle, if you're looking at it from a EEG machine, REM will have different sleep spindles, which is brainwave activity. So REM is kind of like that. It's very, very fast, whereas deep is quite slow and long. And REM also keeps the body in a state of paralysis, which is where we can't move. Our eyes move side to side. Obviously, we're not conscious of this, and our brain is completely taken over the body. There's no functioning for the muscles, because it needs to completely focus on actually consolidating memories and forming new pathways in the brain to improve learning and improve focus, everything else. Now, deep sleep is the opposite. The brain isn't very active in deep sleep. It's sending everything to the muscles. It's cleansing the muscles. It's removing toxins from the blood. It's cleansing lactic acid if you've worked out, all sorts of stuff. It's releasing human growth hormone from the pituitary gland as well. And it's regulating your metabolism. So if you're getting really good sleep and you're cutting off at 3 hours before bed with your food, your metabolism will be spiked if you're getting good quality deep sleep as well. And overall, your muscles will grow better. You'll recover from your workouts faster. You'll actually improve injuries as well. Pain will be reduced because the body can repair the damaged cells and it remove inflammation faster. And that's really the main difference between the two. They just have a different way of serving the body at different points in the night. And like I said, deep sleep will occur at the first part of the night. So if you are tracking your sleep, guys, look for the first portion of your deep sleep. So you have your bedtime here, you'll have a light sleep and then deep sleep. Deep sleep will go along here, then you'll have light sleep, bit more light sleep, and then you'll go into REM sleep at the latter part of the night, because that's the hardest part for the brain to do, is to focus solely on itself and actually do all the work it needs to do to replenish itself, which is why you said earlier, Blaine, if the alarm goes off and we wake up and we're in the middle of a cycle and the circadian timing of our body is not regulated as it needs to be, we will feel really, really tired and lethargic because the brain hasn't finished doing what it needs to do in regards to REM sleep.
Now, I'm so glad that you did the visual with your finger there about the sleep, because I use an app that tracks my sleep. I tell it when I go to bed, and then it has a function where I can tell it when I want to wake up, and it creates a window, and it'll create a very subtle alarm over the span of like a half an hour. And it's very, very subtle. So if, let's say I want to wake up at 5:30, the alarm can start at 5 o'clock. And if I'm in a good sleep, I won't notice it. I'll sleep right through it. But at a certain point, my brain is coming out of that deeper sleep and I start to hear it, and I can time my wake up with coming out of the sleep. But the fun part is when I look at my sleep overall over the night, it almost has exactly that path that you were showing with your finger, where it goes down and then back up and levels out and goes back. And it's just like, that's really cool, because that helps me understand what it is I'm looking at a little bit better.
Yeah. Average duration would be, you would look for 45% of your hourly sleep portion is light sleep, because that's the stage where we spend the most time. It just is, because the body can't keep functioning and doing its processes. It will just tire itself out. So deep sleep would be 30% and REM sleep would be 25%. So if we can look at that, look at the duration, look at the time we spent in each one, then that's when we know we're getting really good quality sleep. If we're getting a small portion of deep sleep, going into light, back into deep, going into light, or having REM sleep earlier on, we know that we're probably getting exposure to late night TV or late night blue light from our devices, and all sorts of stuff like that can disrupt REM sleep, or even caffeine as well. We can still fall asleep, like I said, but caffeine will cause poor REM sleep because of the adenosine that I said earlier on, because the brain can't do what it needs to do because it's trying to fight off the caffeine all the time and get it out of the body.
Now, on the note of mattress, this was a fun one that I had come in, and I was really curious about it. But what about sleep style? When I say sleep style, I mean side sleeper, back sleeper, stomach sleeper, hugging a pillow, sprawled out. You know, is there a better way to sleep, or is that just our natural disposition? How should we be falling asleep?
There is numerous debates about this in the sleep world.
I figured as much.
Yeah, my personal preference is the side position, fetal position, and that's just for postural alignment. If we lie on our side and we have a good pillow and everything's in a straight line from our neck down to our coccyx, and then we bring our knees up and they're still in line, and they're not up here or down here, that's the perfect position. But there will people who will be more comfortable sleeping on their back. My partner, she sleeps on her back. She's more comfortable like that. I sleep on my side. That is just what I've done, you know, in my early adulthood and childhood and so on. There are people who sleep face down. You know, there's no health benefits. There's no real sleep quality issues with that. It is just what is ever is comfortable for you. But the fetal position is my personal preference because it just aligns the body as it should. If we're lying on our back and our legs are over this side and our arms over here and our other arms down here, over time, you know, we can wake up with the old impingement in our shoulder maybe or something like that. But in regards to actual sleep quality and what the body needs to do when it's sleeping, sleep position doesn't really affect it. Now, on the flip side of that, if you have sleep apnea and you're sleeping on your
the next question, yeah.
Obviously, that's a serious issue. If you're wearing a CPAP, you need to sleep on your side. But sleep apnea, you know, it can't really be cured without surgery. I know guys who are incredibly fit. Like, I've worked with guys who are Ironman athletes and have sleep apnea because they part of their throat is just not right, and they've had to have surgery to correct it. But they sleep on their side and they still snore. You know, they got the surgery now or in the past, but that's what was causing poor sleep for them. It's just very difficult with people who have to rely on certain things like a CPAP or you know, a certain pillow or something like that. But it is, again, personal preference, whatever's comfortable for you and whatever's fastest for you to drift off to sleep.
And what a perfect segue into the next one, because the next two questions I'm going to combine into one here, but that's brilliant. Drifting into sleep. How do we drift into sleep? Is there an evening routine that you recommend following? Do we count sheep? Do we focus on our breath? How is it? Because so many people will lay in bed and not fall asleep. They have insomnia, and they just, whereas there's other people like myself, I can be on an airplane in a foreign country and lean up against somebody and fall asleep. Right? There's so much of a spectrum. Like, how do we get into that sleep? Is it trainable? Can we make it a habit? How do we do it?
It's definitely trainable, my friend. It is definitely trainable. No matter if you have insomnia or if you just have difficulty falling asleep, there's definitely things you can do. Now, insomnia is caused by trigger points in our life that have caused anxiety, stress, and perceptions around sleep. We are not born insomniacs. We go through changes, obviously genetically and hormonally, and we do over time need less sleep. But the reality is insomnia is derived from stress. Now, we may not feel stressed, but our body is constantly pumping hormones through it that it doesn't need. And if we're not addressing the stress that is in our lives, we can never look to overcome it. And it's the same if we're lying in bed, we may get good sleep, but there's the 1, 2, 3 nights a week where we're wide awake, we're overthinking, and we can't actually shut off. Now, journaling is by far the most effective way. Now, journaling sounds simple, but there are multiple ways of doing it. Now, my personal preference, Blaine, I know you do it yourself. You may have a personal preference as well. But what I do is I count my wins for the day. So no matter how small. So, you know, this is a win. Having a call with you for me is a win because I get to have a good chat with you. I get to deliver some value. Fantastic. That's a win. Tick that. Carry on. 3 to 5 wins for the day. Doesn't matter how small they are. You've got to have a nice meal with your partner for the first time in a week, whatever it is. And then think about the negative thoughts you have had for that day. So for me, you know, I don't close a sale every day. It's just impossible. But if I don't close a sale for a week, doesn't mean I'm a failure. But there's going to be the odd negative thought in my mind that thinks, maybe coaching isn't for you. What have you done wrong? If I'm not addressing that, it's just sitting there. And it's going to eat its way into my mind. And over time, it's going to cause anxiety when I face the same situation again. From a golf perspective, we all have that one hole in the course we play that causes our scores to go up. It could be a par 3 over water. It could be a par 4 without a bounds all the way down the right. If we're not addressing the fact that that par 4 or par 3 doesn't define our round, we can never look to overcome it and get past it. It's always a mindset thing. Even if you're playing well, your swing might change, but you'll think of the danger that you can come across. And it's the same in life. So address your negative thoughts, bring context to them. Why have you had that thought? Is it something outside of your control? Is it something someone said to you? Is it something that has just popped into your head on the off chance, and you haven't addressed it for, say, a week or 2, and it keeps reoccurring? Then write down, does it matter to you at this particular time? Can you address it in a week? Can you address it now? Does it need your attention? Is it going to take up energy? And all sorts of things like that over time will help to rewire your mind and actually relax you. Now, you probably want an instant fix, but the reality is there's not an instant fix for that. That is going to take, like I said, subconscious habits will take 3 weeks or possibly more, depends how often you do it. If you do it every day, it may even take less. You may become adapted to it quite quickly. But we can't get into that relaxed state, that parasympathetic nervous system that the body wants to enter into with rest and digest 90% of the time, go through our daily functions such as sleep, if we are always in that sympathetic stress, fight, flight, or freeze nervous system, and we're not bringing thoughts and conscious awareness to our negative patterns and our negative situations throughout the day.
I love that, because so much of what I talk about in coaching golfers is the awareness part. And to your point, it's not a sprint. We're fortunate that we get to sleep every night of our lives until we don't sleep anymore. So we have a conscious ability of every single night we can work on making it better, or it can work on us and then it becomes out of our control and we don't know what we're going to get out of it. And I think that's so true in all areas of life. Like when I'm coaching mobility, it's like, look, we can fight against the gravitational pulls and stresses of life that are trying to push us down, and we can work against them to hold ourselves tall with good posture, or we can just let the world win. And we can bitch and moan about it because we don't have that motivation to get through it. But to your point, the more we create awareness of sleep, it's probably going to exponentially get better, because now you're going to sleep better too. And when you sleep better, your mind's more clear. When your mind's more clear, you can be more awareness and take better action. When you're more aware and take better action, you're going to sleep better. And it just creates a positive.
That's it, man. Nailed it right there. You spend 26 years of your life sleeping, 38.1% on average. If you're living to, as a male, to the life expectancy of 82 years, 85 for female, it makes sense to optimize the thing that you do the most. If you're not optimizing your foundation of your health, your brain, like you just said, is running wild, creating negative patterns and thought patterns and scenarios that aren't even there. You don't have any evidence to base these scenarios on, but you think because you're sleep deprived or you've not addressed them, they're going to actually happen. And that's when we think about, oh, I'm going to put my ball out of bounds on a par 4, when you haven't even hit the shot yet, because you haven't addressed the fact that you've got no evidence to base it on. You need to go up to that tee box. You need to be confident. You need to do what you've been doing for the previous, say, if it's the 13th hole, for the previous 12 holes, you've been playing really well. You know, you're 2 under your handicap. That shot doesn't define you, but people put so much emphasis on it because it's their demon. They haven't addressed it. They just want to bury it in their mind and not actually think, what's caused that thought? Why do I have that thought every time I stand on the tee? And it's the same in life. Why do I have the feeling my boss is going to fire me every time I go in the office? Even though your boss never says anything to you because you're actually really good at your job, he just lets you get on with it. And it's that's what I see. And people tell me this stuff all the time. And with my background in mindset, it goes hand in hand with sleep. But that's the biggest thing from my mindset world that I incorporate with sleep coaching, because it's just when people get it, you can see it click and they go, I slept really well last night. And I've been journaling for 2 weeks now and it's just clicked. And fantastic. That's what I want to hear from people.
Brilliant. All right, this one, a lot of my friends, just from the age I'm at, friends, family members, they're starting to have kids. Young parents, they don't sleep well.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do if you are sleep deprived? How important is it to take a nap? How do you get through those potential 3 to 6 years of just you're not getting good sleep?
That's a very difficult one because I'm not a father myself. I'm looking to have children next year. Me and my partner are getting married this year, but it's difficult for me to answer that from their perspective because obviously every child is different. I don't know how they bring kids up. I don't know what the kids' routine is like. But from a nap perspective, if you are in a position where you can get a nap, or you can nap when the baby naps or nap when the toddler naps, we need to be looking at a 30 to 90-minute window. Now, reason being, 90 minutes, we have light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, 30 minutes each. You know, approximately. That's the ballpark figure. If we can get 30 minutes, that's a REM cycle or a deep sleep cycle, which will restore the body to an extent. 90 minutes, we get all three. Any longer than that, we start to feel lethargic because we're waking up out of cycles and we're actually breaking down our sleep pattern and our ideal sleep window. So 30 to 90 minutes is optimal. If we can get 4 hours a night and a nap, that's still 6.5 hours or even 5 hours. We can function on 5 hours. You could say you can get by. You're looking after a child. You're not really doing too much critical thinking, especially if you're a female and you're on maternity leave. You're just doing your natural instinct to provide for that child. You don't really have to do too much problem solving like you're working in an office as an accountant or anything like that. It will come quite naturally to you. The urge, obviously, to provide for your child will come quite naturally to you, I imagine, because that's biology. And we can get by on that shortened sleep cycle. It's just about planning your routine to incorporate when the baby naps. If you're getting your child in a good routine, which I know you will, then you can build your routine around that. So if you know your kid sleeps 12 hours a day or 13 hours a day, how much of that is actual sleep and how much of that is nap time? Nap when they nap. And you can change your circadian rhythm over time. It won't be ideal for you, of course, because it's going against, what our body wants to do. However, it's not forever. Like you said, probably three to 6 years, maybe more. But over time, we can get back on track. It's just a very, very difficult part of our life where we do have to adapt. But there has to be some planning involved. It can't just be sporadic guesswork. Oh, I'm going to nap now while the kids out with the dad, whatever it is. Because if you get back and the kid's still wide awake, you're coming out of a sleep. You're not going to be ready to go. Whereas if your child is napping, they're still going to be quite sluggish and groggy when they wake up. You won't be so much because your body isn't having to grow and build new cells all the time as a kid's is. So you won't have to do as much as if that kid came home with bags of energy from being out at the park with their dad or whatever. And under you've had a 90-minute nap, suddenly you wake up, you need to get going again. And that's when you can sort of come out of a nice peaceful slumber into a bit of stress. And ultimately that isn't what we need to do. So we need to try and think about our routine in a bit more detail and give that as much conscious thought as we can.
So again, I think the big theme of what I keep taking away from this is being proactive versus being reactive. If we're able to separate ourselves from the moment and look at what's coming and we can prepare for it, then it almost puts the mind at ease of it knows what to expect. It knows what's coming. It already has things planned out. And that way we don't have the decision fatigue of just trying to figure out what to do in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if we're just rattling our brain trying to figure out what to do, that's counterintuitive to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not saying, like I say, you don't have to plan every single minute of your day, right? Because that's just impossible. That just, if something doesn't go to plan, that just builds stress. But if you have a time scale of when you can sleep, you start winding down at 9:30, you go to bed at 10:30 and you're up by 6, fantastic. That's best for you. So, from 6 onwards, you can bring in your morning routine, your commute, your breakfast, whatever it is, rather than rushing around the house after a bad night's sleep because you went to bed at 11 or half 11, you wake up feeling groggy. Everything else is built around a routine. And ultimately, off the back of that, you'll feel more productive. You'll get more done. You'll get more done in 6 hours and you used to do in 8 or 9 because you're focused better, you're sharper. Being productive doesn't mean working longer. It means working more efficiently. And if we can work efficiently, the pillar of efficiency is sleep health and our overall well-being and mental clarity. That's how we are more efficient. And that's where I go back again to feeling rested and actually functioning. There's a difference. People say they can function on 6, but have you forgotten what feeling fully rested feels like? You may need 7.5 hours to actually feel fully rested. No, I can get by on 6 hours. And they go into that cycle of never actually being at the high performing level that they want to be. They just coast through life and leave a lot on the table as well as a result of that.
And for all of you watching, if you're honest with yourself, if you wake up and you're feeling good, right? And a lot of us try to convince ourselves, I guess that was good enough, but there are mornings you wake up and you're like, man, okay, that's what good sleep feels like. So I have 2 more questions for you before we transition into our top 10 sleep performance hacks. Again, everybody watching, we're going to do that inside the Tour Shot Golf Facebook group. So if you see us cut out, I'll have the replay posted in there. If you're not already a member of the group, it's free to join. I'll post a link, get you on in there. But before we transition out, I have 2 more questions that kind of go along with some of your programs. You offer a 4-week group training program and then an 8-week one-on-one, more private program. But you've mentioned to me that along the way, especially when people are transitioning into the 4-week program, that one of the big things is tracking your sleep or journaling and things like that. Do you have any specific apps or tech or things that people can use to start that journey of, obviously you mentioned the journal is a really big one. How do we begin that process of becoming aware?
Yeah, I love smart tech. I mean, I wear an Oura ring myself, and I use an Oura ring for my clients. Now, I know that there was a gentleman in your group earlier on who commented, and he uses a Whoop strap. Whoop is fantastic. From a sleep perspective, I just prefer Oura because there's a lot more to it on the back end of Oura that serves me. Right. However, there's various other things like Fitbit and Garmin. Now, bear in mind, the majority of the lower end stuff is probably around 50 to 60% accurate. If you move into Whoop, which is a monthly subscription, you move into Oura, they're like 70, 80% accurate, more accurate for heart rate variability and other metrics like that. But overall, all of that stuff, number one is the sleep journal, because it activates our brain. Like you said, if you're waking up in the morning and you're convincing yourself you feel okay when you're not actually feeling okay, you're just saying, oh, you know, I slept all right, I'll get by. I can have a coffee, I'll be fine on the way to work. That's not good sleep. And unless we're addressing our energy levels in the morning, we're never going to look to change it. The smart tech is fantastic. If we're relying on those numbers, we're becoming obsessed with it. Our attention isn't where it needs to be, because if we look at that and it says you've got a really good night's sleep, but you think, I still feel quite sluggish, but the app says it's good, so I must be good. But we need to bring the brain, the frontal lobe in. Again, I'll mention that because it's the critical thinking part of the brain, and go, no, actually, that isn't right today. I feel like a 6 out of 10, but that's telling me I feel like an 8 or 9 out of 10. So there's something wrong there. So this is where writing stuff down and making it tangible for us to see is so critical. Once we have that habit, we know what's best for us. Then we can look to invest in smart tech to back up our stuff, which is what we do with our clients. On a one-to-one program, we always start them for the first 4 weeks with the journal. The remaining 4 weeks, we give them an Oura ring. I link it up to my end and I look at their data and I spot trends in correlation with what they're telling me on this sleep journal. Then we can see their heart rate variability, how they're recovering, how long they're spending at each stage, their trends and their baseline over time, which is why I prefer Oura over Whoop, because it operates on a baseline rather than day to day. So I can go back and see their data for 3 months and their trends. If they're trending in the right direction, fantastic. And alongside the sleep journal that they started with, then I know the habits are working. We don't rely on tech. Tech is a bonus. It's fantastic. You know, it's a huge part of the market now in health and wellness, but it all starts with us and our actual awareness of what we're doing. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, guys, but it is simple. Like I said, it keeps it simple. I don't need to overcomplicate stuff. I just need to keep reiterating the point and tying it in with other things, because it's so critical to change habits. We have to focus on awareness and actually conscious thought into the brain that then becomes patterns and habits that we adopt later on.
Absolutely. And you know, it's same thing with everything else that I'm teaching with mobility and golf and mindset and everything. Is there's a lot of times people want new, but sometimes it's about being reminded of things you already know and remaining consistent, because consistency compounds over time, and that's where the Absolutely. True magic happens. Now, one of the questions I have a feeling we're going to get to in the top 10 things about sleep optimization and how to do that. So I won't ask that one, but the final question I have for you, at least in this part of the conversation, is an observation that I've made over, I'll call it the last 2 years, which is creating a habit around the first thing I say to myself after waking up. And this started, it was really interesting, using one of my sleep apps. Usually you wake up in the morning and it'll ask you, did you have a good night's sleep? Thumbs up or thumbs down? And there was one morning that I woke up and I felt a little groggy and I pressed thumbs down. And for the rest of the day, I had a bad day. And my belief was subconsciously, I just told myself the first thing in the morning, thumbs down, it's going to be a bad day. And so the next morning, recognizing that, I made a conscious effort of, regardless how I felt, I'm going to push the thumbs up and I'm going to tell myself something positive. Like, today's going to be a great day. And then it plants this seed that for the rest of the day, I'm going to have a great day. So how important is that wake up process? Is there any truth to the idea that if you press your snooze button 2, 3, 4 times, that you're subconsciously telling yourself to procrastinate at the end of the day. Whereas if you just get up right away, you're subconsciously saying, I'm going to be productive. What does that very first minute, 10 minutes, 30 minutes of your morning do to the rest of your day?
Yeah, it's a morning routine is about going from 0 to 100 as quickly as possible. If we're delaying that fuse, you're telling the body to keep doing what it was doing for the past 8 hours of the night. It doesn't need to do it any longer. You need to get up and go, so you can actually get into the position where you are ready and able to attack the day. And like you said, we're hitting the snooze button, the body gets used to that. And when all of a sudden we need to act and we need to do something urgently, even if it's the middle of the day, the body's like, I'll do it later, because that's what you've told it to do in the morning. Snooze button. Yeah, you hit the metaphorical snooze button. You procrastinate, your distraction, Netflix starts to look very tempting all of a sudden, you know, at 4 p.m. on a Friday when you need to hit some deadlines in business or whatever it is. And all of that starts in the morning when the brain is clear and concise because it's had sleep, and it takes in the most information in the morning. And creative thinking and critical thinking are the best times would be for most people between 9 and 11 a.m. So if we are telling the brain first thing to snooze when we need to do the critical thinking, we're not going to be accessing the points of the brain that we need to. That's when we're going to be looking and going, this isn't going in. This information is not going in because the brain is elsewhere. The brain thinks you want to rest because that's what you've told it to do. It may sound crazy, but 95% of our daily actions are done by the midbrain and the unconscious mind. We train stuff over time, it becomes second nature. The brain doesn't want to use critical thinking all the time because it's exhausting. It already burns 20% of the daily calories we use. So it will instead move the information to the midbrain, then it becomes unconscious habit. So if you're snoozing for a year, that's unconscious habit. You don't even have to think about it. You hit the snooze button, hit the snooze button, hit the snooze button. Day after day, the brain wants to get up. You're telling it to go back to sleep. So when you need to rely on it, boom, it's not there. The information is not there that you can't access it. So that first part of the morning routine is critical. If you're in a privileged position where you have your own business, you can work from home, be your own boss, morning routine is the most critical thing to get yourself going. Evening routine is the most critical thing to get yourself winding down for a good night's sleep. And I will touch on those with the top 10 tips. They're just bullet points, but I will expand on every single one for you guys in a group. And we'll go into some detail about morning and evening routine later on.
Fantastic. I am super excited for that part. So for anybody who is unable to transfer over into the group with us, real quick, where can they get in touch with you? Website, email, socials, that whole deal.
Well, website is sleepprocoach.com, and it's got myself and my business partner Angus on there, but it is being updated at the moment, guys, so it's quite sporadic at the moment. The best place to contact me is on Instagram or Facebook, Gary J Allman. I put my middle initial in there just to stand out. I just found it better for marketing.
That's good too.
Yeah, just Gary J Allman on Facebook and at Gary J Allman on Instagram. I'm happy to chat to any of you if you want any tips, any free value off the back of this call. More than happy to have a chat one-to-one in Messenger for 5 or 10 minutes. Just drop me a message and I'll help you out.
Fantastic. We definitely appreciate that, Gary. So everybody who is watching right now, we're going to transition over into the Tour Shot Golf Facebook group here. We'll have the conversation continuing live. If you want to watch the replay, it'll be in there, and I'll post a link on my page on how you can join that group.